This is WRUULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul. You are listening to One Human Nation with your host, Sandy Batiste. This program will be talking about race and race relations in your community and nationally. Our goal is to be open, honest, and productive.
So welcome to the One Human Nation show. If you just tuned in, I'm your host, Sandy Batiste. I'd just like to start out with this friendly reminder that the viewpoints expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of WRUU, its license holder, or its staff. So I'm going to start today with a quote that came across my radar again from one of my favorite activists who's no longer with us, which is the Dr. Martin Luther King. And this was from his jail city writings, the letter from the Birmingham City Jail, April 16th, 1963. So this is what he says. I am not afraid of the word tension. I have earnestly worked and preached against violent tension. And there is a type of constructive tension that is necessary for growth. We who engage in nonviolent direct action are not the creators of tension. We merely bring to the surface hidden tension that is already alive. A quote by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. And in some ways that ties into what Laura was mentioning on her show, that there's a time to be active, because how long does it take for us to be unengaged, and we see what happens. So this show, on the One Human Nation show, was two things that came across my radar this past week that I thought, this would be, I think, fitting to talk about this. And I think you have all probably heard about the college admission scandal. So we're going to break that down just a little bit more. And we're going to hear from a high-end college consultant. And his name is Alan Koh, K-O-H. And he was shocked to learn that one of his colleagues who worked for he was a competitor. But, you can have colleagues that are competitors. He was a competitor, and this was one of the main persons pleading guilty for crimes including conspiracy and racketeering, and that name is Rick Singer. So this particular clip we're going to take a listen to is something, I love my YouTube. It was published March 19th, 2019, and it was written from the perspective of Alan Koh, and I'm just going to start by referencing, I normally don't get into the race thing, but I just want to give a context. Alan Koh is Asian American. Rick Singer, if you haven't seen the news, is white American. So listen to his response, Alan Koh, in learning about this. And this was an interview that he did with Jake Nickel for the Wall Street Journal. So let's take a listen, and we're going to talk about that, as well as I found a really cool short clip from students from different walks of life reacting to this clip. And then on a level, as far as what our takeaway is, it's how do you feel about that? How are you responding to that, especially for those of you that have kids that are going through college and on that track, and working through the process, the only way they know to work through the process. So let's take a listen to this clip from a consultant that was a competitor as well as a colleague of Rick Singer, that's going through this whole, I call it a hot mess. That's what my mom would call it. So let's take a listen.
Anyone who guarantees anything in this industry is either lying or incompetent. He knew something I didn't.
The mastermind is William Singer of Newport Beach, California, who pled guilty today to crimes including conspiracy and racketeering and became a cooperating witness.
When I found out, I was confused, surprised, disgusted. The creativity was perversely impressive and also just shocking.
Alan Coe is the founder and CEO of Cardinal Education, based in Silicon Valley. He has worked with and competed against William Rick Singer in the exclusive college consulting industry.
I reached out to Rick after the news got out, asking if he had any students he wanted to transfer over to us. Students need full focus from the people helping them. So I made that offer, and he politely declined, saying that he thinks if enough time passes, this will blow over.
The alleged scheme turned into the country's largest college admissions scam. Federal prosecutors say that wealthy parents paid Singer hundreds of thousands of dollars to get their children into elite colleges.
Prosecutors claim changes to SATs and some allegedly paying for their children to be recruited for sports they never even played.
I've heard of resume exaggeration. I've never heard of wholesale fabrication. I definitely felt some pity.
Thank you for making the time. I really appreciate it.
Coe says he met Singer 6 years ago at a shared client's house.
I was struck by how confident he was that he could make things happen. Knowing what I know about our industry, I mean, we play in probabilities. There's no such thing as certainty. I always tell my staff, I always tell my clients, we can't guarantee anything. Looking back, his supreme confidence makes a lot of sense.
So what we'll do is we'll follow up with you by email.
15 years ago, Coe started Cardinal Education while he was still an undergraduate at Stanford University. He now recruits and works for clients around the world. In a business he says is concierge student counseling, ranging from tutors and application help to assisting parents with the do's and don'ts for donating to universities.
Our clients are very wealthy, very powerful. Our most common package is about $50,000. Our most expensive package is $350,000. And then there are some special cases for which we're charging $1 million, sometimes even more.
It's unclear what exactly you get for the money you pay because each package is customized, but Coe is emphatic that he gets results for his clients. Though he couldn't explain the difference between a $50,000 or $350,000 package, Coe says the more you pay, the more access you get to him and his staff.
How good are your study skills right now?
15 years ago, the acceptance rates were relatively high. For the top schools, it was in the mid to high teens. For very good schools, they were in the 20s. Now there are a lot of schools in the single digits.
The college counseling industry has exploded in recent years. There are now 17,000 college consultants, nearly 6 times the number in 2005. With acceptance rates at elite colleges hitting record lows, many parents are taking to desperate measures to get their children into these schools.
Colleges are extremely opaque about the process. People know that there are a lot of things they don't know. That helps insecurity and fear creep in.
It's actually a two-way interview, all right? I'm interviewing Jay to see if I want to work with him, and both of you are also interviewing me to see if I'm someone you want to work with as well.
We've never had a parent coming in expecting what Rick does. I had never even considered it to be possible, frankly.
Coe says Singer's scheme was eye-opening, but he hopes the fallout will be good for the industry.
This is going to eliminate a lot of bad actors in the college consulting industry. This is an incredible humiliation for any university that's been touched by this. They don't want this to happen again, and there's going to be brutal scrutiny.
So that's one man's opinion who is actually in this field and had been doing this for years. And actually, you heard the clip just like I did. He reached out after all of this hit to see if Mr. Singer wanted to refer the students over to him that still needed care. And the response was no, because Mr. Singer expressed that he felt in a period of time that it would all blow over. And, you know, it's sad to say, but there's a side of me that believes that. And he has actually been accused of taking up to $25 million in bribes. So an article that if you're looking for a quick read, and sad to say, I do read books, but sometimes when I'm looking for information for the radio show, I'm trying to look at things that have been consolidated for a quick read. So I found this article that was pretty insightful, and the title of it is College Cheating Scandal, Can System Be Fixed? The editor is Patricia Mah, M-A-H, and it was on Yahoo News 360, published March 17th, 2019. So, of course, they reference some of the prominent media figures, actresses that you may be familiar with, but they do that in a quick read. And some of the things that struck my attention before we get to listening to what students, how their response was. There's some students from Stanford University. They filed a class action suit claiming they were never informed that the process of admission was an unfair, rigged process in which rich parents could buy their way into the university through bribery. And so, you've been seeing this fallout from some of the actresses that were one that was associated with the Hallmark Channel and cutting ties with that and all this kind of stuff. And it goes on to say the fallout has hit coaches and athletic officials and others named in the case, including a private equity firm, hedge fund CEO Manuel Henriquez. It just goes on and on and on. And so as I, was really thinking about this, and I think in a certain way, whether it's, kind of sad, I think for me as a Black person, we always have felt that things were not in our favor. We were always taught that's why you have to do better and work harder, and that doesn't mean that things are going to be fair. And there's a quote in this article, and her name is Shaniqua Golden, on a platform called Vibe, V-I-B-E. And her quote is, "This is white privilege at work, and kids of color suffer the price of admission." She says, "Your privilege is putrid. Your hypocrisy makes my stomach turn. Your inability, as scripture notes, to see the plank in your own eye has left you blind to your vile ways. How dare your child be so mediocre, and you still deem it fit? They deserve excellence." So there is this whole, backlash of how the reform is going to go for school counseling programs in order to level the playing field. And we'll come back to the last part of this from this article that I always think is interesting, how everything is tied back into our political platforms based on the left and the right and the fraud involved. But before we do that, I do want to play this really short clip from the students that responded and what they thought, what their thoughts were in reference to this massive fraud that has taken place over years.
In one word, anger.
It's something of shock.
It's disappointing.
It's not too surprising, it's just a little disappointing.
I'm really glad that this actually got found out.
My friends and I myself, we work to the bone to get into these schools because we don't have the money or the power or any of those stuff.
And to see folks that are, abusing the system, it's appalling, and to me, at least, questions the whole legitimacy of our entrance process.
What it says about America is that we need to look at how wealth influences all aspects of our life, and we need to take the college admissions process and put it very far away from that because it's not about wealth.
Originally, the reason why I came to America to pursue my college degree is for the college entrance selection process, but knowing that this bribing scheme actually happened, this definitely put me down.
Things are so competitive, and I think people see the advantage you get when you have an excellent education or you have a name brand school. So you kind of assume that it would be natural, there would be some level of cheating.
When I do apply and get my admissions results, I will actually end up wondering if maybe I didn't get in because someone else who was just wealthier than me ended up getting into a spot that I really worked hard for.
Certainly the members of the institution who accepted bribes, who sort of tarnished the credibility of the institution, should be dealt with in the strongest and reproached in the strongest way possible.
So as you digest on that, what it ties into me on so many levels is just how fair we have systems in place that it's not just related to college admissions. And that's what this is all about for the One Human Nation show, is what does it take for us to wake up to what do we need to do and how can we take action. There was another quote from this article that I pulled off the internet entitled "College Cheating Scandal, Can System Be Fixed?" dated March 17, 2019 by Patricia Ma, M like Mary, A.H. This was a quote from Renee Seiler from USA Today, and it really resonated with me. And, what kind of message are we sending to our kids? And this is what she says. Even as adults, we want to believe the things we tell our kids. We desperately want it to be true, that all it takes is hard work, that you hold your destiny in your own hands, that you and you alone are in charge of your success. Only we know that's not true. Sometimes in our quest for perfect parenting, we forget that real growth doesn't happen in times of comfort. Those indelible lessons come when we are forced to think in ways we otherwise wouldn't have. So it's a good read. I definitely would recommend, just doing the internet scroll and picking up on this article. And as always, I will try to remember to post the reference when I upload the recording from the show, so you can go back and this one you would have to Google because there's not a clip on YouTube. The others you will be able to Google the clip on YouTube that I'm referencing here. So, and just kind of to weigh in on the other side, because I am in the school of the belief that college is not the key for everybody. And I'm happy to see that there is more emphasis on vocational training and picking up a trade that you frankly can, run your own business and not walk away with all of this college debt. And so I don't think that having a college degree is in itself going to give you success and open doors. Believe me, I have a college degree and it was nothing like that when it was still like, well, what experience do you have? And I went to a very decent college, Mercer University in Macon, Georgia, during a time when it wasn't as integrated as it is now. So I think there's a lot of emphasis put on the names of colleges and elite colleges, but it doesn't replace having common sense. It doesn't replace having critical thinking. It doesn't replace having conversation with our kids, whether they're black or white, that are truthful, that are authentic, so that they don't buy into a narrative that's false, and then they get out there in the world and find out, oh my goodness, this is not the way it is. So they can either go one way or the other. They can work through that, or if they're in a weaker mindset, and I call it a weaker mindset, they're going to cave in ways that can be very detrimental. I think will be very detrimental to them, as well as in many ways to their family. So I just thought that was, kind of an interesting thing for us to really absorb on our journey of racism and reconciliation in this country, is to really take a look at what messages are we sending to our children. And even now for many of you, your grandchildren, what are you talking about to them around, if you still get together for dinner time, or just when you have that time, you're picking them up from school, and, just how do you engage engage in those conversations. And sometimes it's just this small increment of time. And are you truly helping your kids to get on the right track based on what their ability and skills are? Or are you engaged in the process, realizing that some kids come from a household that no one's engaged? They have no adult engagement. And unfortunately, it then, falls back on that school system, which is obviously, when you look at the whole counseling system, how that can be aided by corruption. So, it's kind of food for thought. I know I've shared a lot of information in the first 30 minutes of the show, but I really wanted to get that stuff out about the college admission system before we talk about the next half of the show on another thing that caught my attention this week that I thought was very interesting. And it really all gets back into what do we internalize as our message, and what kind of mindset do we have? I always heard from my dad, even when I would call him from Austin whining about something, he would say to me, Sandy, you cannot go into this with a defeated spirit. And, some of that I got, some of it I didn't get until I was older. But, it was a realistic conversation. And I think one of the most painful things for my parents as we all got older and adults, and we could have more adult conversations, not just as parent to child. I think one of the most hurtful things for them to realize is when I said to my dad one day, and I probably was in my 40s by that time, and we were having this racism conversation, and I said to him, Pops, at the end of the day, it matters that my skin is the color it is. That hasn't changed. How I deal with that, how I work around the system, that still exists. And I can remember he had this shocked look on his face, and this, for people that know my dad, he just didn't have that kind of expression often, of just total bewilderment and pain that his kids still had to deal with the same issues that he dealt with, even though they did everything possible to make sure we did have access to education, and, we're pushed for reading and writing and all of that stuff. But racism exists. Pretending it doesn't exist doesn't make it go away. So if you just tuned in, you're listening into the One Human Nation show, and I can't believe it's almost time for us to do the break that we're going to do. And when we come back, it's going to be a little switch in topic, but it still ties into the same conversation about race and racism, and how it impacts us day to day, and how we individually have to work on how we're going to address it, what our walk is going to be. Do we recognize where we're contributing with our unconscious bias? And so the article that I'm referencing, it was something that came across my, believe it or not, Facebook feed recently, but it's actually from an old blog. And I say old, how funny we look at time. It was written July 12th, 2018. And the title of this blog from this person that wrote it, her name was Hannah Drake, and she goes by Hannah Drake 628. She wrote this, and the title of it was "Do Not Move Off the Sidewalk Challenge, Holding Your Space in a White World." And sometimes what's interesting for me, it's not only the articles that come through on my Facebook timeline, but it's the comments. So I'm just going to reference, there are 310 comments, and I would strongly advise you to take a look at the comments in addition to the article. But we're going to take a little deeper dive into that when we come back, and we're going to take a listen to some of our announcements.
This portion of WRUU-LP Savannah Soundings programming is made possible by listeners like you and Brighter Day Natural Foods. Brighter Day is celebrating its 40th year serving the Savannah community with produce, vitamins, and supplements, and a deli and juice bar. Brighter Day is located at 1102 Bull Street at the south end of Forsyth Park. More information available at 912-236-4703 or brighterdayfoods.com.
How many times have you heard WRUU's corporate underwriting message? If you remember it, then your potential customers will remember your message as well. We are offering this space to connect corporate and institutional partners with our loyal and active listeners. Underwriting on WRUU is short, so listeners don't tune out. It's exclusive, so your message won't be lost in advertising clutter, and it supports Savannah's only community radio station. For a marketing package to increase your reach beyond traditional media, email underwriting at wruu.org.
So it's that time again to vote for WRUU. It's time again to vote for WRUU for Best Local Radio Station in the Connect Savannah poll. To vote, simply go to the Best of Savannah login at the Connect Savannah website at connectsavannah.com/Savannah/best of. Last year, WRUU was named runner-up in the Best Local Radio Station category, and this year we're gunning for number 1. Voting ends at midnight on Tuesday, April 16th, so get your vote in for the Best Local Radio Station, Savannah's only all-volunteer community station, WRUU 107.5 FM.
WRUU 107.5 offers Savannah's most diverse radio programming. This evening from 7 to 8, Here It Is Tomorrow presents almost popular, no longer popular, and never was popular music. From 8 to 9, Crucial Rhythms features dance hall and reggae. From 9 to 10, Rigor Mortis brings you rockabilly, psychobilly, surf, and swing. And from 10 to 11, Route 66 highlights American rock as a window into the nation's culture. Find our full schedule at wruu.org.
The Savannah Chatham Sustainability Coalition will present this year's Earth Day Festival, featuring workshops, tours, exhibits, vendors, and live music on Saturday, April 20th, from 12 to 5 p.m. in a new location, Daffin Park. For more information, call 912-662-5162 or email earthdaysavannah@gmail.com.
This is WRUULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul.
So we're back to the One Human Nation show, and we're going to get into the second segment of the show. So it's a little segue from the first. Referenced it before the break, but this article that I'm going to refer to is from a blog, and it's entitled "Do Not Move Off the Sidewalk Challenge, Holding Your Space in a White World." And Hannah Drake 628 wrote this blog, and here's what she states. And this was written July 12, 2018. Last year I was in the airport on the rolling walkway with clear directions posted before stepping on the sidewalk to stand on the right or walk on the left. There was a white man in front of me that disregarded the sign and stood in the middle of the rolling walkway, preventing anyone from passing him. Behind me, I could hear someone approaching, and I turned around and saw a middle-aged black woman walking briskly with her rolling suitcase flying behind her. I pressed myself and my luggage against the side rail to move out of her way and allow her easy access to pass me. She whizzed by me, and in front of her was the white man, oblivious that she was behind him and in an apparent rush. He never turned around, never moved, never once thought that others behind him might need to pass. While I would like to say the black woman leaped over him Luggage in tow, in a single bound, she stood dead in her tracks. She never said a word. She never politely tapped the man on the shoulder to say, "Excuse me, may I get by you?" She just accepted that he was not going to move. And for some reason, even though she was in an apparent rush, she made a choice not to ask for him to cede the space for her to pass. She waited for the rolling walkway to come to an end, waited for him to saunter off the walkway, then immediately took off in a sprint, heading towards her gate. The small interaction stayed with me my entire flight. As I was making my connecting flight, I was looking forward to having pizza at the airport. I cannot recall the name of the restaurant, but it has the best pizza with prosciutto, arugula, cooked eggs on top, surrounded by hot, creamy goat cheese. After I got my pizza, I sat down at an empty counter and put my earphones in, anxiously ready to take a huge bite. Before I could get my first bite, a white man walked up to the opposite side of the counter facing me with his food. I looked up at him, then looked down at the completely empty counter space beside me, sitting at it, wondering why he chose to stand directly in front of me as he added salt to his food. Typically, I would move down, but after witnessing the black woman on the rolling walkway, I made a decision. I am not moving. I do not care if he wants to stand there until I finish every bite of this pizza. I refuse to move to accommodate him. After he enjoyed a few bites of his food and noticed that I was not going to move, he packed up his belongings and moved to the end of the counter. Victory, with an exclamation point, is what she writes. It was just that easy. I made a conscious decision as a black woman to hold my space. I was not going to cede my space to a white person because that is what was expected of me. Now, before you read any further, this is not a blog about being rude, impolite, etc. I believe as an average human being, we understand that there are some times you must and should cede your space. If you are in the way of someone that has some physical challenges or someone is elderly and as a result has some physical issues, that is different. I am not talking about ordinary, everyday courtesy we extend to others for often apparent reasons. That is not what I'm talking about, so please do not message me about that or make this blog about that. If you do, you are taking the easy way out of this blog and not looking at the totality of what I am discussing. I am talking about black people, particularly black women and people of color, being conscious of how they navigate throughout spaces, making accommodations for white people, and white people having an expectation that black people or people of color must navigate their bodies to allow white people access in spaces. This is more than someone being rude. This is about white people feeling as if black bodies should accommodate them in spaces, and if we do not, it is seen as the black person being rude, unpleasant, and intimidating. As an example of this, she goes on to say in this article, is a recent incident documented by Frederick T. Joseph, who took a photo of a white woman placing her feet on his dining tray on an airline. The airline staff did not address the woman, and when Joseph asked the woman to move her feet, she accused him of disrupting her flight. According to the article, when the flight staff asked the woman to remove her feet, she said, "If I put one foot down, I want to be accommodated for accommodating him." In this space, the white woman felt she was well within her right to infringe on Joseph's space, and when told she could not, she wanted to be accommodated. as if respecting his space was doing him a favor. And there's a picture that is posted from Frederick T. Joseph. He posted on his Twitter account. Black people and people of color accommodate spaces for white people so often that we may not even realize that we are doing it or have it ingrained in us as Black culture to cede your space. I hadn't given thought to that incident in the airport in a while. However, yesterday, after reading a Twitter thread by Tatiana Mack, that's like I said, you've got to read the comments, because it gets to be pretty interesting. So when it came across my feed, and I'm going to ask this person that I know if she'd be willing to share more about her story and how this impacted her in holding her space in Austin, Texas. So as always, I try to I make it a point of protecting the anonymity of people that want to share their stories. And the invitation is always open to either do a pre-taping or call into the show. And you can reach me through my email address at onehumannation@gmail.com. So I know this is some painful things to think about, whether we're Black or whether we're white. It's how do we really look at how we get beyond this whole idea of, if I'm this way, I'm right, and if you're that way, you're wrong. So this is going to bring me to another a clip we're going to listen to. And what sparked this for me is something I read, and I actually read even more of this post on Laura's Facebook page, but then I couldn't find it when I needed it, so I had to go about it in a different way. But it was a quote from W.E.B. Du Bois. And he was saying, this is in 1956, this is what he said, because he'd had it. I shall not go to the polls. I have not registered. I believe that democracy has so far disappeared in the United States that no two evils exist. There is but one evil party with two names, and it will be elected despite all I can do or say. And he goes on to say, this is the part I couldn't find, that he was hoping that 100 years from now, people were not thinking that one party or the other was going to save them. And I've posted that before because I find it fascinating, but here we are. Here we are, and we're still on that track of what you see for the polarization. And I think it's very intentional to keep people separated. That's why I believe we have to be open to having civil discourse face to face. And unfortunately, social media has taken away a lot of that. It's where people feel like, oh, well, I can say or do anything because there is not anything that anyone can do to me. I have the power and I can do whatever I want to do. So this brings me to another topic, because I'm one of these people that migrated. I never went north. I know some friends that did go north with the migration. I did go southwest because I didn't like cold weather. So we're going to listen to this clip that I found to be very interesting to kind of get things in a new light as far as what's shifting in the demographics and how people are moving back to the South. So let's take a listen, and because I want to make sure we get this in as we continue to wind on our time, and some of my experiences of moving back in to what I truly consider to be the South in Savannah. But before I play the clip, I do want to say, I've been very surprised about my experiences in Savannah as far as holding my space. and not moving off of the sidewalk, or, you know, seeing how things were going to play out. And it really has been very much a courtesy issue that I did not see a lot of in Austin, Texas. As a matter of fact, I still get surprised when a white person is holding the door for me to walk through, and I'm always very thankful and to say thank you, because I think part of it is a courtesy. That's different from the expectation that because of the color of your skin being white, then a person of color should cede to you. And for the person of color, it's how do we engage at that point? What do we do at that point? Where do we find our voice? Where do we find our strength? Where do we find allies that can help us? So what's interesting to me is to see how the migration is changing with people moving back to the South. So let's take a listen.
There was a phenomenon that started back in the early 1900s. It continued through the 1970s. It was known as the Great Migration. Blacks moved in huge numbers from the South to large northern cities where great paying industrial jobs meant a life of home ownership, even sending your kids to college. Well, those factory jobs are gone, gentrification is in, and black Americans are moving back down south. This has had enormous political and cultural implications. Join me now to discuss the impact and the outcome of the midterm elections. Roland Martin, host and managing editor of the Roland Martin Unfiltered Show. Roland, thanks for joining me.
Glad to be here.
You know, we saw in Alabama, I think, that election to fill Jeff Sessions' seat where black women showed up in droves and sort of made history, if you will. We just saw the elections in Georgia and Florida. And we're seeing the South overall change. And I think one of those dynamics are a lot of northern blacks who have returned to the South. What are your thoughts on this? That because it's cultural, it's economic, and
I'm going to pause this for a minute just to give you a point of reference. This was published on YouTube, November 2018. Roland Martin is joined by Charles Payne on Fox Business Making Money to discuss the Great Migration reversal, where African Americans are moving back to the South. So let's continue listening.
Economic and it's political.
Well, I think if folks first of all study the fact that it was Robert Abbott who founded the Chicago Defender, who used the paper to tell blacks to come north. Many blacks were fleeing the South because of violent racism and for greater economic opportunity, not wanting to be on plantations. The problem is when they went up north, what they found was compacted housing, redlining. You still had segregation that was there. It simply wasn't the same as the South. As a result of manufacturing, to your point earlier, manufacturing leaving, but also cost of living in many of these places. If you're living in Chicago, you're living in Washington, D.C., you're living in a lot of these places, I mean, it has become very expensive to live. And so as a result, people are moving back. I remember, and this is not just folks, who are middle class. A number of years ago, I was talking to Bradford Marsalis, and he lived in Westchester County in New York, and he moved to North Carolina. So you're actually seeing that because the cost of living is also a particular issue. So if you have finite dollars, you can actually stretch your dollars more living in the South as compared to living in a lot of Midwestern places or in the Northeast.
Right. Now, here's the thing, Roland, that I don't get. In New York City, for instance, there's a tremendous amount of opportunities, particularly if you've got the right kind of background, if you've got the right kind of pedigree. But this whole movement, the gentrification movement that's pushing people out, it's hard if you don't. And if you're born in the city and you don't, you have to leave it. So when folks leave these northern cities and go to the South, why do they vote in the same people who are going to enact the same policies, high taxes, high regulations that don't afford the sort of economic mobility that people want?
Because it's actually not tied to that issue. Just like you might have folks who are living in the South in rural areas right now who still might vote Republican, but they're saying, oh my God, what am I going to do about my health care? My rural hospital is shutting down. People vote for a variety of different interests that go beyond just that. And so it's not just easily, well, why do you vote Democrat? Why do you vote Republican? There are numerous reasons why people do that. Also, frankly, how they grew up, how they were raised, what is also in their particular families. You talk about gentrification. And one of the issues that you have there is that what happens is in many of these areas where you have poor blacks, poor whites, poor Latinos, guess what? That's available land that's cheaper. And so what then happens is developers then come in, buy that land, redevelop it, and then when other folks can't live other places because it's too expensive, they begin to build those places up. That's what you saw actually in Harlem. And so the cost of a brownstone there today is totally different than it was 10 years ago. Now, when you talk about on the political side, also check this out. I was a woman who I know who moved from California to Atlanta, and she talked about how voting in Atlanta was totally different than it was in California because she said, man, I was used to a certain way of voting with different machines, and I come here, it's totally different. And that's what you're also experiencing, African Americans who are moving from northern or midwestern places or western places back down south, and they're still encountering some of these issues of voter suppression and things along those lines. Right. But this is where I keep saying, though, where if Republicans actually would talk to black people and stop being scared of black people and truly present a broad-based agenda, they might have an ability to pick up votes, but as long as you are putting forth policies, and especially when it comes to voting, that black folks don't appreciate, ain't going to happen.
Let me ask you, because we only have a minute left. I did some research after the jobs number on Friday, and the employment to population ratio for black people has exploded. It's higher in the last 22 months than it was in the prior 8 years. Isn't there, at some point, will black people say, hey, you know what, maybe the economy is doing better, maybe President Trump deserves some credit, maybe I should just listen to the message and not be so focused, to your point, on how I was raised or what my friends are saying?
No, actually, black people are listening because it goes beyond that. Donald Trump has to answer the question. I have been asking this White House, why is he trying to get rid of the U.S. Minority Supply Development Council, the only federal agency created by a Republican to aid black businesses? They want to wipe it out of their budget. He has to deal with why the Department of Justice under Jeff Sessions also say that, hey, we're going to go back to private prisons, and also telling people we're going to prosecute to the highest extent. Here's the piece. Black people do listen. See, people act like black people are not smart. No, black people are very astute. They know exactly what's going on. What Donald Trump has to offer is a broad-based message. It can't be singular, saying, oh, look at the black unemployment rate. Yeah, but the question is, what are your other policies that also impact black people beyond a job?
Roland Martin, great seeing you, and we'll pick up this conversation again real soon. Thank you.
We'd love to. Thanks a lot.
There was a phenomenon that started back in the early...
So if you just tuned in, you're listening to the One Human Nation show, and I've expressed before, and I want to express again, I look at political parties the way they are, and I've said before, there's not one particular party is going to save you. I don't like to hear bashing one way or the other, and I think they did a pretty good job of not doing that. But, how many people are open to listening to reasonable conversations with a different point of view? And that's where the whole reasonable, I think, comes in, because some people are like, well, they're not even rational. It doesn't even make sense. But that's where the face-to-face, having the conversations, being able to express your point of view in an environment that you feel is going to be safe and non-judgmental. And for some people, they're just like, you know what, I don't care if it pisses people off. I'm just going to say what I want to say. Well, that's all well and good, but I don't think it really changes anything. It doesn't change us having a safe and open dialogue. So if you just tuned in, you're listening to the One Human Nation show. And remember, it's time again to vote for WRUU for Best Local Radio Station in the Connect Savannah poll. To vote, simply go to the Best of Savannah login at the Connect Savannah website at connectsavannah.com/Savannah/best of. Last year, WRUU was named runner-up in the Best Local Radio Station category, and this year we're gunning for number 1. Voting ends at midnight on Tuesday, April 16th, so get your vote in for the Best Local Radio Station, Savannah's only all-volunteer community station, WRUU 107.5 FM. So as we wrap up from today's show, again, I encourage you to reach out to me by liking the Facebook page, One Human Nation. And if you're not on Facebook, then you can also connect to the podcast that's on YouTube and connect through my name there. And you can pick up the One Human Nation podcast. And I would recommend you subscribe to the podcast because I do try to upload the recorded show so that you can go back and listen if you missed a show, or sometimes you just need to hear it again. I think there is so much we can do to be actively engaged, but you have to decide what your comfort zone. You have to decide, what's going to work for you to be engaged in the process. So I've loved being back in Savannah because I observe first. I try to learn what's going on locally, and fortunately, Savannah is like a lot of cities where you can listen and actually watch the city council meetings and work session. You need to know who your district alderman is, and hopefully you've got a good one. I've got a fabulous one. I'm not going to mention that because, it just starts that whole political thing again. But you also have to know the importance of forming allies. Finding your allies. If you're a person of color, there's just some things you're not going to get done on your own, but there are people out there that are willing to help if we're willing to reach out and collaborate and not cede our space on the sidewalk. So get ready for Troy Stoner coming up with Sound Limits at 6 o'clock. And as we prepare for that, remember, again, connect with me through my email, onehumannation@gmail.com. Again, that's onehumannation@gmail.com. I hope the show has been beneficial for you, giving you some insight in what you can do to continue on your journey. Hopefully connect with some other people that are also like-minded, or maybe not like-minded, but they're willing to have civil conversations. And so remember, the viewpoints expressed in the preceding program were not necessarily those of WRUU, its license holder, or its staff.
Bye.